All right, so I want to welcome everyone to our December Lunch and Learn. We're here today with Jake Miller from Project Neutral. Jake and I actually connected through a mutual, well, he's one of our volunteers actually for our engineer in residence program. And he was kind enough to share with me and share with us at Engineers of Tomorrow what Project Neutral is doing, what Jake is doing there, and some of the really cool resources that they have available. So, of course, I was really interested in that, and we always love to find great ways that we can connect real relevant things that are happening to different audiences. And for us, that's the K to 12 group for those that are a part of the engineer in residence program, and have some really interesting conversations about it. Recently, so you're going to hear more about what the work that Jake is doing at Project Neutral and some of the resources that are available. But I thought I would just take a second to share a story that I thought might be relevant today. So I was fortunate enough a couple weeks ago to connect up with a few hundred students through an event with Skills Ontario. And the lesson or the talk that I gave, I wanted to make sure it was really engaging and interactive and fun for the kids. So I had them collaboratively design a poster with me, and it was supposed to be, or the goal of this activity was that it was an awareness poster, and it was to be something that was related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we could have some really good conversations about that. And what I found super interesting and relevant to today's talk is that all of the kids, I did a poll. I used the fancy tech on the Google Meets, and we did a poll to find out which of the UN Sustainable Development Goals we wanted to collaboratively work on this poster for. And every time I did it, they always picked climate change. So I just thought that was really interesting. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And so to me, it just really points to the fact that this is something that kids are thinking about. And so if there's ways that we can kind of meet them and have that conversation with them, those are things, definitely that we want to explore here at Engineers of Tomorrow. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Jake, as I mentioned. He is currently the acting director at Project Neutral. So he's going to spend a few minutes talking us and walking us through the work that's happening there and the resources that they have available. And please, I invite everyone to make this an engaging, interactive event today. So if you have questions or comments, be part of that conversation, and use the chat feature, or jump in with your thoughts. So with that, thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it over to you, Jake.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was a really great anecdote to kind of set things up. One thing I would say is that, like, not only are kids aware of climate change, I think they're actively concerned. I think it's something where here is this scary global issue where often they are told it's going to affect their future. I feel for them in the way I assume kids who grew up during the Cold War must have felt, where there's this kind of ominous threat that they don't have much control over, but they know is going to impact their future. And what we're trying to do at Project Neutral is take that kind of big, scary concept of climate change and bring it down to a more human-sized issue that you can actually get some traction on and take some action on and feel that you can make some measurable progress around. So what's Project Neutral? It's a household carbon footprint calculator. We're based out of Ontario, so we use Ontario-specific emission factors and modeling, and we are built specifically for households. We've made our tool free for anyone to use. We're actually a little charity that's built around this. Today, I want to take you through our tool. We have a quick getting started estimate survey that we do, and I want to show you a bit of the back end of our platform and link you up with our school resources so you can see how you might be able to use this in the classroom as already one of your engineers in residence has done. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And if you want to follow along with me, feel free to. You can open up your phone or another browser window and go to www.projectneutral.org. But I'm just going to go through our Getting Started survey, and I'm going to do it rather slowly just so that anyone can follow along with me if they feel like it. So you'll see this smiling woman and our tagline, and there's this big pink Get Started button, so I'm going to click that. And I'm going to create a fake account, so I'll be fake. Make the fake email. You can make a it's going to ask for a password. It has to be at least 8 characters long. There we are. And then because it's a fake account, I'm not going to join the newsletter. But if you're following along and you're creating a real account, please go right ahead and do so. All right, so you're thrown right into our Getting Started survey. So it takes around 3 minutes. I'm going to take a bit longer because I'm going to talk all the way through it. But this is something that we usually suggest. And I'm getting some there. Are you seeing some issues on my screen? It's looking good? Okay. So we're going to say I'm here in Toronto. And there. You can enter your postal code if you choose to, but I'm not going to because I'm a fake account. And then we want to know how many adults and teenagers live in your home. So it's myself and my wife. We have my daughter who lives with us as well. And we want to know what type of home you live in. So if you live in a detached house, a semi-detached house, anything like that, we're going to ask you about how many floors your house has, how many bedrooms, as a kind of proxy for the size of it. I live in an apartment. It has 2 bedrooms. If it was a bachelor, we'd have to count that as 1 bedroom, and we rent it. And it's a new building, under 30 years old. Then we want to know a little bit about how you get around your transportation. So if you bike, if you walk, if you take public transit, do all 3. And then driving, I don't actually own a car, but there's some driving done on my behalf and on my daughter's behalf. So I like to enter that in, consider it. Contact car. That's doing the driving. How many minutes do we drive on an average weekday? Maybe about 15 minutes. And the total for an average weekend, the number of minutes would be about 45. Gasoline cost. All right.
Jake, is this sort of collecting baseline data? Is that what all these questions are doing?
It's giving you a quick estimate because we had a tool that took 30 minutes to fill out, and we lost a lot of people halfway through the process because it was just too intimidating. So we have a quick getting started estimate, and then there's deep dive modules for each of these categories, like travel, transportation, and stuff, where you can get a lot more accurate. But we want something that, if you're in a classroom or if you're doing a facilitated session, you can get a kind of a rule of thumb, a kind of like basic footprint quickly.
Okay.
Did anyone travel in my home by plane in the past 12 months? No. No travel anytime soon. If you said yes, though, we're looking just for the per person round trip flights. So if a family of 4 took a trip, you would put in 4. And if one member had to go on 3 business trips, you'd add another 3. So that'd be a total of 7. But in my case, no flights in the past 12 months. So that will be quite low. Then we want to know a bit about your eating habits. I would be an average omnivore. And then we want to know how often you throw out leftovers or spoiled food. Never as if you're amazing, if you're like a restaurant that, like makes a soup out of all your scraps and everything. I'm going to be honest and say sometimes, although I'm trying to improve it. I'm very lucky I have a building that has a compost program. So yes, I compost. And the last question we have is about waste. So if you live in a house, you probably wheel a bin to the curb, and you can tell us about generally the size of that bin and stuff. Here in a kind of shared building, I use garbage bags. That's place. And then we want to know just how many of those grocery size or like those kitchen catcher size garbage bags my household produces each week. I'll say about 1.5 each do in a typical week. And we also recycle. Yeah. All right, and this is the last page before we get your results. We'd just like to learn how people heard about Project Neutral. I'm going to say through a workshop. You can give us a bit of feedback here if you choose to. And then there's this button, calculate my results. And all right, here we are. So it says my carbon score. So my household is producing 11.1 tons of carbon dioxide. The top 30% of Project Neutral households are doing better than me. They've managed to pull it down to 9.3 for a household of my size, 2 adults, 1 kid. But I'm doing better than the average household, which is at about 18.6. And here we can see in more detail where I'm doing well. So I'm doing great in home energy emissions. So a lot of people in a relatively small apartment. Food emissions I'm a bit high on, as with waste. So I kind of know 2 categories where I've got lots of opportunities to improve. If I scroll down from there, you'll see you finished 1 out of 6 surveys. So we've just done this Getting Started survey. We can do all these other surveys to get, which are like deeper dives on these specific topics. So you can enter in actual utility data in home energy. You can get a lot more specific about cars if you have multiple cars with daily transportation. With food, we can go into a lot more detail. And also down here at the bottom, we have these take action cards. So just for each of these categories, we have suggested actions, and some wonderful researchers, grad students at York University developed these for us. So they've done a ton of great research. And our hope is that just by reading one of these cards, you've kind of taken that first micro step towards the action. The last thing I want to show you is, I'll show you first, the action journal. There we go. The action journal allows you to kind of take an action card and work it through in stages. So you can choose a few to be a work in progress, and then when you've completed it, they can be your accomplishments. And another thing we have is this Your Community tab. And if you do this as a classroom or as a school, the nice thing is you can join. I can create a group code for that classroom or for that school. And then you can have a group dashboard that will kind of look at the aggregate results for that group and the averages for that group. So let's see if this group I used for a previous webinar is still available. There we go. So you can see the average score, my score, the total for that group, a bit more details, and the completion rate for various surveys and the totals for those surveys themselves. So that's something that can kind of make the data a bit more meaningful to students when you're doing it in the classroom.
So does that mean, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, Jake, you could create a group called Engineer in Residence, for example, and then any of the classes that wanted to participate could join that group, and then it just aggregates all the data from all of those classes?
Hmm. So you could
Okay.
do a couple of things. You could do a group just for your whole organization, so that every class was being aggregated into the larger picture of that. Or if you wanted to take it to your classroom, as Brian, the engineer who brought
Hmm.
us to your attention, did, he just emailed me, and I created a class for him with its own group code, so that when he went into the classroom and did it with students, they were just able to punch in that code, and they could see, okay, as a class,
Mm,
our total footprint is this, our average footprint is that, and got a bit more nuanced data about their collective impact.
I see. So they're kind of going home, and then with their parents, they're adding in like individual each student in that class. Is that what they're doing?
Uh, well, no, they can just if they go along with him, all they
Hmm.
have to do is enter in the group code provided, and they're automatically joined that class.
Oh, okay, I see. Neat.
But if they do it back at home, then they just write down that group code and enter it in once they've
Hmm.
done it, and they have the dashboard. And then the last thing I want to show you is under this Take Action tab, we have a link called School Resources. And this is just, we've created this resource kit so that teachers, um, so that folks like yourself can bring this into a classroom and kind of bring use Project Neutral to kind of spark a climate conversation and a kind of data-driven one. So it doesn't take much prep time. We've designed it so that it can be used in a virtual class experience. So we have a presentation you'll be able to download or access. Right here, you're able to sign up a class or sign up the entire school if you want to do something, kind of a larger engagement. And we have some curriculum connections here. We have a great connection with grade 9 geography and grade 10 science. I believe the grade 10 science actually has um, a requirement to use a carbon footprint calculator. And you may as well use the only footprint calculator that's designed for Ontario, which is ours. And then we have like these resources. So we have a presentation that you can walk through that kind of contextualizes what a carbon footprint is. You can download the PowerPoint or make a copy of Google Slides if you're a Google person. We have a student worksheet that students can use, and they can do it online, or this can be printed off and done at home. A letter to parents. This is particularly good if you're going to be doing this with a younger group of students. In fact, if you're going to be doing this with a primary school class, I suggest that you go through the footprint as an example and kind of, encourage discussion as just you go through the footprint, and then have the parents go make an account with their kids and have them calculate their footprint together. And then there's a classroom discussion guide for once results have come in, and as a way of kind of, contextualizing and having a larger conversation. So that's everything I wanted to show you for today on our platform. I'm going to stop sharing my window. And I hope that turned out well for you. One thing I was noticing is as I was clicking, there was some blocking issues on my screen. Hopefully that you didn't see that, and that was just an artifact of. Okay, great, good. So if I was shifting around, it was just so that I could get refresh things a little bit. Yeah, and I'm willing to take any questions or discuss how this might be used in the classroom or anything like that.
Okay, I have some questions, just looking through
Fantastic.
this. First one is, what's the uptake of your program? How many
In
people are
general, or the
interested?
school program?
Let's talk the school program. Like, do you have a number, like how many schools you're in or classrooms you're in or teachers are using this, or any metrics? Or what about web metrics, like how many users a month or whatever? I'm trying to get a feel for how popular is this. And I guess the other question is, do you have competitors? Like, sorry, I'm a marketing guy, so.
Hey, you might have some good insights on how to position ourselves. We we launched this new tool recently. So in the past, I'm pulling up my stats here. In the past month, we've had about 250 people calculate their footprint.
Okay.
Right now, we're nearing about 6,000 total households, and that represents about 17,000 people in terms of who has the number of people in Project Neutral households. The school program, it's relatively recent, and as I'm sure everyone's aware, it's really hard to get a teacher's attention right now, and I think quite realistically, they are at their. I've lots of teachers in my family, and they've told me candidly, this year's a wash. Like we're just we're treading water in a lot of ways. So I'm hopeful that in the new year, as things kind of reach more of an equilibrium, as things reach more of a reliable cadence when it comes to the classroom, that there'll be a bit more capacity for teachers to bring this on, especially around Earth Week and Earth Hour, and kind of when there's that programming that's typically so involved in the school. If we're still doing things virtually, this is a really great alternative exercise to kind of bring that awareness in. But also, I'm really excited to be chatting with you folks because it's really nice to have someone who's familiar with this platform, already has the group or class code set up, and can just go in and deliver something and really take it out of the teacher's hands. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are about that.
Okay, great. Another question or maybe a comment is I was looking at the website and I was filling in the survey as you were talking and following along with you and everything. And I noticed when I got to the end that some of the suggestions were, put in a high efficiency furnace, get a setback thermostat, which I've already done, by the way, because I was very interested in this like many years ago. One thing you have here is switch to a narrow ground source heat pump, which is a great idea. I've looked into it. But one thing I see missing is converting your house to an R2000, because then your energy requirement drops by 90% from what I've read. And I know there have been some houses, like my house is 40 years old, and usually people don't do it, but I've read case studies where people have done something like, not cheap.
No.
Okay. But it's in the order of what a ground source air pump or heat pump would cost you in the 30 to 40K range.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, because my way of thinking is it's better if we reduce our need for fossil fuels than it is to go to high efficiency fossil fuel use.
Yeah.
Right. Now, okay, so an underground heat pump, the beauty of that is it doesn't use fossil fuels. You are using some energy because you got to pump water, pump air and everything. Pump water, I guess, for the ground source, what I was looking at. So just a comment about one other thing to look at is better insulation, or looking at R2000. I mean, I've done the better insulation thing in the roof, and there's only so much I can go to the walls without major reconstruction.
You can do the blown in the walls, yeah.
But that's what an R2000 does, is not only do they put extra foam in, but they insulate the wood. So wood turns out to be one conductor of heat and cool through the building. And in my 2x4 construction house, the wood studs conduct all the cooling in the winter, or the cold. Right, and there's no insulation. So in an R2000 house, they break that. So they have effectively two different walls.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they break that conduction because the heat is conducted in. Anyway, stuff like that I think would be
I've written this down as a next action card to develop, which I think is great. And then I think a bit more like just already you educated me a bit about what an R2000 house looks like. But also I think this is a good example about why this is the right audience to maybe bring this into the classroom, because with an engineer's background, you'll be able to field like detailed questions like these that when I'm often kind of presenting this and say, hey, bring this to your community, a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm not quite comfortable enough with the science, which I don't think would be the issue here. So yeah.
I was thinking the same thing, Jake. I think it's really a neat like sort of synergy that's happening. And Bruce, as you were having that conversation with Jake, I was thinking, wow, it would be so neat because you could have a conversation like that with the students, right? And get them thinking about, like, use those cards as, you know, a way to generate and get them thinking about ideas, but then get them solving that problem and thinking of other ways they could solve the problem and coming up with ideas just like you were describing, Bruce. I think that would be a really neat message. And to me too, just thinking about how the dots connect, right? I hear from a lot of
Yep.
kids when we go into a classroom and we ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up, that sort of a thing. What do you want to do? What's a change you want to make? And they a lot of times will tell us, like, I want to solve climate change, or I want to end homelessness, or, like, you know, these really big problems that they want to get involved in. And they never ever say that they can do that as an engineer. And you know, what you were just describing, Bruce, is a perfect illustration of how you can. Like, that's literally what engineers do. So I think it's just a great way to get those conversations happening.
Right.
Yep. I mean, there's other things that we don't think about here is solar hot watering. Solar hot water is very big in Japan. There's nothing here, very little here in Ontario, at least in Ottawa where I live. Actually, I don't even think this, I know for the longest time the city of Ottawa was against it or something. There was you couldn't get a building permit to put one in for the longest time. I don't even know if you can get it now. But there's another area where we can cut down. I just installed a new hot water tank because mine died.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, well, I could put up a hot water tank on my roof or a thermal solar hot water heater.
Yeah.
You know, I see a lot of people are installing solar panels on their roofs, and I'm kind of looking at that, and then I get this flyer from Ontario Hydro that shows me the sources of energy in this province, and only about 8 or 9% comes from natural gas. And there's nuclear, there's hydro, there's wind, solar, biofuels, and then natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, if I put up solar panels on my roof, I'm not saving that much, 9% of what I'm saving.
There's a house down
And
the street from me that just did that. We watched them install these solar panels, and I just
yeah,
walked by the other day, and it was fully covered in snow. All the solar panels were fully covered in snow.
Solar panels. We
Do you
yeah,
have
have
that
that?
happened.
You have
Yeah.
My
one?
neighbor has that. My neighbor put some up 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and he was showing me the software. And oh, look, I can see the production dynamically on his smartphone. He saw all the things and everything, and how much money he was making because it's
Yep.
feedback and all that good stuff, and there's a return and all that good stuff, which helps that way,
Yeah.
right?
I installed ours about 5 years ago.
Okay, to heat for your home or to feed back into the grid?
It's on our house and it feeds into the grid, because if we
Okay.
installed them without the grid, we would have to have batteries.
Right.
So
Yep.
yeah, it is interesting. It kills me when there's snow on them. I want to get up there with the broom and sweep them off. But
Yeah.
the production in the winter is surprisingly more than you'd expect.
I think
Oh, yeah,
that's
there's a
one of
lot
the
of
other
sunny days in the winter.
that's really great
Yeah.
about what you're doing at Project Neutral, Jake, and what we're doing is very regionally based, right? Like, we're talking to kids in Ontario. So
Yeah.
the fact that you're in Ontario and your data is from Ontario means you can have these really relevant conversations,
Yep.
because
Yeah, you're all touching on an important point, which is that our grid here in Ontario is quite clean. Like, compared to a lot of the calculators out there, they'll say like, "Oh, switch your light bulbs and stuff." For us, like, our grid is so clean, that's not really the concern. In fact, most of the suggestions we have here at Project Neutral boil down to electrify. You know, have an electric car. Like, where with our clean grid, it makes such a big difference to just stop burning gas to drive around and move to an electric. So, yeah, that's where regionality really comes into the picture. Because if you were doing a similar talk in, say, Saskatchewan, you'd have to think a lot harder about whether to suggest an electric car.
Well, I was just gonna
Mhm.
say that, like in Toronto, you can like you don't even own a car. Where I live, I mean, I live like just an hour away from you, but we are driving all the time. We have kids in
Exactly.
rep sports that are, and we're traveling like hours away. Like I was looking at your numbers as you were putting them in, I think, oh my gosh, I drive so much more than that. So it is so unique to the different regions. So being able to have those kinds of conversations and I think one of the things you were saying kind of at the beginning of your conversation, Jake, about being able to break this big idea down into smaller things that you can do is really powerful.
Mm.
I like the food waste one as well, because for kids, that's
Yeah.
something that they're really good at doing. They're good at wasting food. It would
Yeah.
be it's nice to see that measured.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think, Jake, when we first met, maybe we were talking about the story of the blue boxes. I don't know if you remember this. And um, that's one of the things I think is really neat about what you're doing and making this a resource that's accessible to schools, because that was arguably the way that blue boxes caught on, right? The
Mhm.
story goes that they launched the blue box program, it failed, so then they got kids excited about it, and the kids made their parents do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a child of the '80s, I was part of that wave. And actually, now that when I talk to people of my parents' generation, I say, "Oh, do you consider climate change? What are you doing about climate change?" A lot of them will say, "Well, I recycle,"
Yeah.
because that was the last
Yeah.
big kind of push that they were given to do something for the environment. Um, and unfortunately, recycling is really important. But by the time you're recycling, the carbon content of that product is in the air. It's a pretty minimal thing when it comes to climate change. So a kind of a new type of outlook and a new set of activities need to be revealed to people. And yeah, we feel that like kids and grandkids. Um, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and already I can tell like she is changing me. Um, and it's one of these unique points in life where you actually are malleable to change as an adult. You're ready to have like your outlooks change. You have someone in your home who can advocate really effectively, um, which is why one of the things that we try to do with this school program is you introduce it, but we really try to push the kids to do it with their parents because we think having those intergenerational dialogues are a really powerful way to get the ball rolling when it comes to Canadian households, when it comes to kind of taking more individual action. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rebecca. Yeah.
I like to hear a little bit about your own story. We've got a little bit of time left. Do you mind telling us a
Sure.
little bit about more about how you got involved with Project Neutral? Like kind of
Yeah.
what's your why behind
That
what
was
you're doing?
that was my next question is
Oh,
tell us about yourself, your
yeah.
background.
So I came into Project Neutral as their product manager. So I'd been working on a few kind of community level tech projects, and Project Neutral wanted to relaunch their tool and their platform. So I came in to do that work, um, and it was an interesting experience. We had been funded through Ontario's Cap and Trade program, and as I was there, and as we were finishing up the tool, that disappeared. So it was a real interesting. It's been an interesting couple of years pulling together what we do have, but I'm very proud of what we've built now. And we've had other funders come in who've helped enormously. Um, but I was kind of brought in as the techie person, and I had a fantastic director who I worked alongside, and then she went on parental leave, so I kind of stepped into this role, and it's been really wonderful for me. One thing I kind of like about myself, which is what and the audience we're trying to reach is before this, I would have never called myself an environmentalist. it wasn't part of my identity. I didn't bleed green. I cared, but it wasn't something that I kind of, situated my identity around. And that's the group of people we need to reach now. The people who aren't like the converted, who don't already have their solar panels or know necessarily about the impact of, properly, how important weatherproofing your windows is. We need to reach the people who say, yeah, climate change is a problem. I've accepted that, but it isn't really part of my identity to be doing anything about it yet. And to kind of say, well, it's really approachable, and like the solutions and technology are already available, and they're actually often things that will end up saving you money and have you live in more comfort. So I think that's what I bring. I hope is kind of the everyman.
Well, I find it really interesting, that perspective, Jake, because I would say we're really aligned with that in the work that we do through Engineers of Tomorrow and the Engineer in Residence program. We're trying to reach the kids who think that they couldn't be engineers or don't know what engineering is, and help them see it in a different way as well. So I see some parallels there between what you're saying, trying to reach those people that don't identify as environmentalists or think that there's anything that they can do, and help them see it in a different way.
Right.
It's kind of solving the same problem, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm looking over because I jotted down some questions that I had as we were kind of preparing for this. What do you think? And sorry, Bruce, do you have any other questions? Did I?
Oh, go ahead. I have lots of questions. Go
Oh,
ahead.
well, I don't want to steal one of your questions, but I was curious to know what you think. And you've maybe talked a little bit about this, but what's the biggest challenge when it comes to educating people on climate change? Do you is it the fact that it's such a big problem, like that breaking it down piece, or is there something else? Like, what's the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is that carbon dioxide is immaterial and invisible. It's really easy to get people excited about waste. Like, there's the movement of, don't give me straws, don't give me extra packaging. It's because you have that tangible experience of having to then throw it out. And I think that moment of doing that kind of, when waste is in your hands and you are wasting, it's a verb that you, the person, are doing. That's the point of friction for a lot of people. With carbon dioxide, it's different. You're driving around, you're not seeing all the carbon dioxide coming out the back of your tailpipe. If carbon dioxide was green or smelled bad, we would not be having this problem. If you could see the soot, say, that all that carbon represented, this would be we would not have gone down this pathway. So one of the things we're trying to do with Project Neutral is to say, it's this many tons, and make that number visible, so that by measuring, you actually do have a proxy of that kind of of that moment where you can kind of say, oh, by driving around this much, I'm pumping that much CO2 into the air.
That's so true. I never even thought of that before. It's not a thing you can see, and being able to help people visualize it, I think, is really powerful. I'm trying to think now, what would 11 tons be equivalent to? Is that the weight of what's what could I tell my kids? That's as big as
Now,
There's one thing I've got a volunteer developer, a great student working on, is a little widget that would be able to say, that's this many acres that need to be planted this year, and this many barrels of oil, and so forth. But one example I like is if you took all the carbon in a ton, a metric ton of carbon dioxide, and turned it into graphite, which is basically pure carbon. That block of graphite for each ton would be 600 pounds. So
600 pounds.
600 pounds.
How many pencils would that be?
That's a good, yeah. How many pencil leads would that be?
Yeah.
thousands upon thousands. But that's when I give talks
Maybe
sometimes.
convert it into Minecraft blocks, Jake. Then you're speaking their language.
Wow. Okay, that'd be good.
I have
Yeah,
to tell
like
you,
for my household, we're 12 tons a year, so it works out to me basically producing a 20-pound block of carbon every day. And if I had to take that to the curb or throw it down my garbage chute, I would myself and everyone else would be taking a lot more action around this issue.
What were you gonna?
I was watching The Crown, and there's an episode where there's pea soup fog in London.
Right.
I don't know if you ever watched that, but
Yeah.
that was really extraordinary. That makes you realize like that was caused by the coal, right? I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was coal. Yeah.
And the weather.
Yeah.
But people were coughing, people were going to the hospital, they were so sick.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because my wife discovered The Crown about 10 days ago, and we've been watching it. And when I saw that episode, and we actually researched it, and there, according to the official records, there was something like 3,000, 4,000 people died because of that. And unofficially, they think it was as high as 12,000 people died of it. But near as I can tell, it was the coal heating, and there was an inversion which kept it locked in for 5 or 6 days. But that's the kind of thing that happens, like CO2. Yeah, your point about CO2 is very interesting. Like, it's invisible, you can't see it. So how do we know it's there, and how do we get excited about it? But converting it to pencils, like that would be 10,000 pencils a day. Your carbon you're putting into thing, I think would be, if you could put into something simple that everybody understands. Oh, I drove to the store. Oh, there's 50 pencils, or whatever, 200 pencils. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just curious about what you're doing to. I've never heard about this. This is fantastic.
Right.
It's really interested what you're doing. What are you doing to get into more schools? I think schools is the way to go. Well, there's two things. One is schools, and then the federal government is promoting this. The next economic build is going to be getting rid of fossil fuels and more clean energy. So I'm just wondering if you're thinking about moving in, getting contacts in the federal government or something to help sponsor you or fund you, or provide a method for you to grow and get this message out.
Absolutely. We're watching closely what the federal government's doing and what funding channels they have available for folks like us. One thing I'm wondering, is I'm a big proponent of like carbon labeling. I'd like to have that on a lot more products and services. I think that kind of consumer awareness would be a really powerful tool moving forward. And if there's going to be a carbon tax, then I think tools like ours and that developing that knack for knowing where carbon's coming from and what the carbon intensive choices are versus the low carbon choices is going to be a pocketbook issue. So that's something I'm kind of aware of moving forward.
Jake, have you guys heard of the superclusters? Do you know about them?
No.
Superclusters. So it's through Government of Canada, and different organizations are part of different superclusters. So I'm inclined to think that at least one or two of the superclusters have this on their radar. So like I know there's some, I'm just looking it up here to see if I could find what their kind of focus areas are. But it's through Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. So there's stuff there, and they're really directly connected to industry. So
that's terrific. I'm going to look into that.
And then in terms of schools, Bruce, I mean, I really see great alignment like the framework that we have with the engineer in residence program, like we have almost 200 engineers in 200 classrooms across Ontario, right? So if we could get a few of those engineers taking some of the
Yeah.
load off for the teachers, because we know that there's just, there's just so much going on for them, even on a more normal year,
Right.
and bringing that to the kids. I think that there's ways that we can do that, right? Bruce, we can maybe talk to the content working group about it.
No doubt about it. But let's face it, that's a drop in the bucket to the number of classes in this province
Yeah, for
and the
sure.
number of schools. So I'm thinking of more high level of going in and talking to like the OCSB or the TDSB or any of these major school boards, where you
Yeah.
go in at the high level and do a presentation and say, we'd like to work with you. We don't know how, but here's what we're on about. And this is
I
popular.
agree.
And,
Yeah. Going in,
you
if you
know,
can find superintendents that are willing to listen and get excited, then that's a good path. But I also have found, like within school systems, and is that you kind of can take like this two-layered approach, so kind of top down as well as bottom up. Because if you can get a teacher really excited about it, then they tell all their teacher friends, and then those teacher friends start doing it too, right? So I think
yeah.
there's some really interesting possibilities there.
Well, there's another thought I just had while you were talking, Rebecca, and that is maybe there's some synergy here between the two groups that we
The
could go
engineer
in
in
and
residence and those two groups.
exactly.
Oh, 100%.
Well, no, between engineers and residents and the project neutral
Yeah.
to work together to expand. Because I'd like to see engineers and residents in every classroom in this province.
So would I. I'd like to see it in every classroom in Canada, Bruce.
Well, let's start. We get Ontario, you've got 40% of the population, so
True.
then everybody else will follow along. But
Yeah.
anyway, maybe there's some synergy that you guys could work together to approach. We're in schools already. Maybe we could work through our schools, our contacts or whatever, and,
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think
promote this.
getting involved in schools, I think it's once you're established, you can be very strongly established, but it takes time, it seems. And
But-
it's this past year I had the goal of like really getting into schools, and then there was the teacher worker rule, and then COVID,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like the
Last
worst
year was
year
rough.
to kind of make that my theme. But I'm hoping that this next year capacity kind of clears up a bit, and we're in conversations with a few school boards, but I'd love to be introduced to a few more. And the last thing I wanted to just put in everyone's mind is most schools now, certainly most high schools now, have eco teams. And I think there's a real value in training an eco team around Project Neutral and saying, bring this to your peers. When classes have homerooms, just go around and talk about, have everyone measure their footprint, because there's a real value for students to teach each other and to kind of, I think it helps to have it from a respected engineer or like a position, someone who's had a career that touches upon these issues, but also it's really powerful to hear it from a student, a peer of yours who really cares. Like that can kind of break through a bit of the break through a few barriers or some cynicism, I think.
I would have to add, as a parent, I was on the parent council, so I got to see firsthand how competitive the teachers who were running the Greens team, so competitive. They were so determined to get down to zero waste, and we were trying to get in a new provider of lunches, a lunch company, and they wanted the one that had the compostable packaging, and that's how we chose that lunch company. So that's a really strong way to get into the schools for sure. I think so.
Okay, that's great to hear.
They're very passionate about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they can set some really neat goals, right? Like you've got a bunch of kids, and you can easily kind of make the problem not invisible anymore.
Right.
Well, this year zero waste this year. They don't want anything brought, nothing left
Yeah.
in the school. It's all coming home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. We had to get reusable packaging for my grandkids. They're not allowed to take bags in or anything. It all has to be, bring it home,
Yeah.
nothing left.
Same
And
here.
even little plastic baggies are verboten. You can't have them.
I know.
It's all zero waste.
Yeah. We just have a couple minutes left. Did you have any other questions for Jake, or Jake, did you have any other anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I wanted to thank you for all coming and this really great conversation. And I'm really excited about what you folks are doing. I had when I was in school, I had something similar where a police officer came in, and something similar where a kind of a business development guy came in. But I would have loved to have an engineer.
Be your own entrepreneur.
Pardon me?
Those were the days when it's be your own entrepreneur in the 80s.
Yeah,
and 90s.
exactly. Yeah. I would have loved to have an engineer come in because when I went to university, I had several friends in engineering, and I had then picked that track of, like, no, I'm like an arts, I'm like an arts kid. I'm all about English and philosophy. But I overheard a lot of the conversations, and I thought, like, oh, this is dealing with issues and in a way that's really fascinating. And I kind of wish that I'd had a bit more of my an experience where I could have seen the broader picture of what engineering offers. So
We hear that so
I love what you folks are doing, and if there's a possibility for us to collaborate, I'm all for it and really excited by that opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for taking some time and sharing your great resources with us today. And we can very easily, I mean, step one, or maybe a little baby step we can do, is just share the recording that we've made of this conversation today. And
Sure.
Bruce, maybe you and I can take this back to the team and get their thoughts on it and see how we can scale the impact. Like I said, I think this is just such a great conversation to have. I see this as a way of just kind of speaking to what you were just describing, Jake, about your own experience, to help those kids connect the dots and see that, there is something they could do about climate change, and the path, an engineering path could lead them in that direction. And we're definitely not trying to convert every kid into an engineer, but we want to open their eyes, and we want to just tell some really great stories about what's possible with engineering, and help them feel more confident. Jake, you talked at the beginning about kids being so overwhelmed, right? Like, there's just so much going on. I really feel for them as well. And if we can give them some confidence in their future, then hey, why not? Well, so with that, we're just about at our time here. I'll wrap up. I wanted to thank everyone again for coming. I do like to take a second to thank our sponsors, like you, Jake. We are a not-for-profit, and so we're always very grateful to find the funds to be able to continue and support this work. So thank you so much to our sponsors. We have Woodbridge Foam, we have Linamar, Queen's Faculty of Education just signed on with us, and Smith & Anderson Consulting engineering firm. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors. And am I leaving anything out? I don't think. Happy holidays to everyone. Please have a wonderful holiday.
Yeah. Happy holidays to everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.